It happened just like that. One morning, I woke up to find everything I thought I knew had been stolen by the person I trusted the most. My name is Lena Crawford, a forensic accountant, and today I'm uncovering the darkest secrets of my own life. But this isn't just my story. It's about exposing a network of lies that could destroy more lives than you can imagine. Don't miss out on this journey. Hit that subscribe button now. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting faint stripes across the room. I woke up, stretching lazily, only to realize that something was terribly wrong. The space beside me, where Nathaniel usually slept, was empty. A sharp pang of panic tugged at my chest, but I pushed it aside, telling myself he was probably just in the kitchen making coffee, as he sometimes did on Sundays. I took a deep breath and rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the lingering grogginess. But then I noticed the silence. There were no sounds from the kitchen, no soft hum of the coffee machine. The apartment was eerily still. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up, my bare feet sinking into the cool wood of the floor. I walked slowly toward the kitchen, my mind racing. Maybe he had gone out early for something. Maybe he was just being distant. Lately, he had been distant. I had noticed the signs, smaller things at first. The late nights at work, the unexplained phone calls, the way he would quickly close his laptop whenever I entered the room. But this was different. I entered the kitchen, scanning the counter for the usual mug he'd leave by the coffee machine. But there was nothing. No coffee brewing, no sign of him at all. Then I saw it. On the fridge, stuck to the door with a magnet, was a piece of paper. I walked over and pulled it off, my heart pounding in my chest. The note read, "Goodbye. I never loved you anyway." I stood there staring at it. My mind went numb for a second, the words swimming in front of me. I never loved you anyway. Those words rang in my head. I had suspected something was wrong for months, but this felt like a punch to the gut. I had always trusted Nathaniel, believed in the life we were building together. But this was the last thing I had ever expected. I let the note fall from my hands and slid down onto the kitchen chair, trying to collect myself. My phone buzzed on the counter, breaking the silence. I picked it up absent-mindedly, but then the screen lit up with a series of notifications. Fraud alerts. I blinked, reading them again. The alerts from the bank, the credit cards, each one more alarming than the last. I could feel my breath catch in my throat. But instead of the panic I expected, a laugh bubbled up from deep within me, unexpected and bitter. Of course this was happening. I had already seen this coming. Nathaniel had been pulling away for months, and now, in one final move, he had taken everything he could. Emotionally, financially, he had drained me dry. I had watched the signs, known deep down that something wasn't right. And now, here it was, laid bare in front of me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. No, this was about something much bigger. Nathaniel wasn't just leaving me. He was running. He was leaving behind a trail, one that I could follow. And I, of all people, was the perfect one to follow it. I stood up, pushing the chair back with more force than necessary. I needed to focus. I needed to stay calm. I wasn't just some victim here. I was a forensic accountant. I spent my days tracking down fraud, uncovering the lies that others tried so hard to bury. If Nathaniel thought he could walk away from me and leave behind no trace, he was dead wrong. I was going to catch him. I was going to expose him for what he was, a liar, a thief, a fraud. I walked to the desk in the corner of the room, grabbed my laptop, and opened the folder labeled Nathaniel. It was a digital collection of all the small things that didn't add up. The late-night trips he said were for work, the sudden interest in our financial accounts when he had never cared before. I started combing through it again, meticulously documenting everything, every transaction, every receipt, every phone call I had traced back to him. There was more, though. I could feel it. I could see it in the numbers. in the patterns. This wasn't just an impulsive decision. Nathaniel had been planning this for a while, and he had made sure to cover his tracks. But as I looked deeper, I could see the cracks in his plan. They were small, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but not to me. He had drained our savings. My savings. I had trusted him with everything, and now he was gone. But the one thing I had left was my mind, and I would use it to track him down. I grabbed my phone again, pulling up the number for my lawyer. My hand was steady as I dialed. I didn't have time to sit around and wallow in self-pity. I had work to do. "Hello?" My lawyer's voice came through the phone, calm and professional. "I need your help," I said, my voice cold with determination. "We're going to take him down." After hanging up, I sank back into the chair and took a deep breath. I wasn't sure what the next few days would bring, but I knew one thing. Nathaniel wasn't getting away with this. Not this time. The journey ahead would be complicated, and it wouldn't be easy. But I was ready. This was just the beginning. The quiet hum of the cafe was a far cry from the chaos that had been swirling inside my head for the past few weeks. I sat at a small table near the window, staring down at the half-empty cup of coffee in front of me. It had been a long time since I'd allowed myself to sit still like this, to simply wait. But today was different. Today, I was meeting Rachel Clark, one of Nathaniel's other victims. When I had first discovered her name tied to Nathaniel's finances, I hadn't known what to expect. But when I contacted her, I found that she was eager to meet, to share her story, her version of the story I had begun to piece together. She wasn't the first victim of Nathaniel's manipulation, but there was something about her, something that told me we were about to uncover much more than we'd ever imagined. The door opened with a soft jingle, and in walked Rachel. She was exactly as the articles had described, tall, poised, confident, but her eyes, they were different. They were hard, like they had seen too much. She walked over to the table with a firm step, offering me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You must be Lena," she said, her voice low, but there was a hint of warmth in it. "I've heard a lot about you." I stood and shook her hand. "It's good to meet you, Rachel. Thank you for coming." She nodded, taking a seat across from me. We exchanged a few pleasantries before diving straight into it. I didn't have the luxury of small talk. Nathaniel had hurt us both, and we didn't have time to waste. "I know this might be difficult," I started, "but I need to understand exactly what happened. How did Nathaniel get to you?" Rachel sighed, her fingers tapping nervously against her coffee cup. "It started like it always does, right? He was charming. Too charming, really. He made me feel like he was the one person who truly understood my ambitions, my goals. I'm in tech, but you know how it is. No one really respects you unless you've got money, right?" I nodded, my heart sinking. I knew exactly how that felt. She continued, "I trusted him, and over time, he made it seem like he was doing me a favor, guiding me, helping me with my investments. At first, things were going well. My portfolio was growing and everything felt perfect. But then, one day, I noticed something strange. Small withdrawals, transferred funds I hadn't authorized. I confronted him, and he assured me it was all part of the plan, but something didn't sit right. So, I started digging. Rachel paused, looking down at her coffee as if it held the answers she'd been seeking for years. It turns out he had been siphoning money from my accounts, not just once, but repeatedly. I found hidden transactions, phony investments, all under his name. I was devastated. I thought I could trust him. He took everything I had, Lena, everything. The pain in her voice was palpable, and for a moment I couldn't speak. I had been where she was, feeling the sting of betrayal, realizing the person you loved was capable of destroying everything you had worked for. But there was something else there, something powerful. Rachel wasn't just a victim, she was a survivor, and now we were in this together. "Did you report it?" I asked softly. She shook her head. "I tried, but you know how these things go. I'm a CEO, for God's sake. I couldn't just go public with something like this. It would ruin my career. Nathaniel knew that. He knew exactly how to keep me quiet. But now, I can't stay silent anymore. I know there are others, more women like me. I leaned forward, my heart pounding in my chest. I found the same thing. His fraud wasn't just about me, Rachel. He's been running a multi-state scam, targeting women like us, successful women in finance, women he could manipulate. He's been doing this for years, and I think we're just scratching the surface. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something like hope in them. "You're right," she said, her voice stronger now. "This isn't just about us. He's been running a massive operation, and I'm willing to bet he's done it to other women too. I don't care about my career anymore. I want justice." A sense of empowerment washed over me as I listened to Rachel speak. This wasn't just about exposing Nathaniel. It was about bringing down an entire network of con artists, a network that had been thriving on the pain and betrayal of women like us. I glanced down at my phone as a message from the FBI agent I'd been in contact with appeared on the screen. He was ready to meet, to discuss what we had uncovered. I showed Rachel the message, and she nodded. "It's time," I said. "We can't let him get away with this. Not anymore." We spent the next few hours exchanging details, sharing everything we knew about Nathaniel's financial dealings, the names of other potential victims, and the patterns of his fraud. As we spoke, I could feel the walls I had built around myself starting to crumble. I wasn't alone anymore. I had allies now, and together we were going to take him down. The FBI would help us, but we still had a long road ahead of us. This investigation wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I knew the truth, and now it was time to make sure Nathaniel faced the consequences. I stood up, offering Rachel a hand. "We're in this together now. Let's make sure he never hurts anyone again." She shook my hand firmly. "Agreed. Let's make him pay for everything he's done." As I left the cafe, the weight of what lay ahead settled on my shoulders. This wasn't just about taking down Nathaniel. It was about exposing a system that allowed men like him to prey on women who trusted them. I wasn't just fighting for me anymore. I was fighting for every woman he had ever hurt. The FBI would be involved now, and the investigation was already in full swing. But as I prepared for the next steps, I knew one thing for certain. This battle wasn't over. Nathaniel had no idea what he was up against. The coffee shop was quiet, almost unnervingly so. It was a small, secluded place on a street corner in downtown Chicago, the kind of place where people came to escape the noise of the city. I had been there once before, back when everything felt normal, before Nathaniel's lies had turned my world upside down. But today, it was different. Today, this place was the setting for the confrontation I had been preparing for. The low hum of the espresso machine was the only sound as I sat at the corner booth, my hands folded tightly in front of me. The FBI agents, Mark Roberts and Claire Daniels, were just outside, positioned in a discreet van parked across the street. We'd spent the last few days setting up this moment, tracking Nathaniel's movements, gathering evidence, and finally arranging for him to meet me one last time. I had no idea what he thought was going to happen here today, but I knew what I needed to do. Let him think he was in control while the FBI prepared to bring him down. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out quickly, glancing at the screen. Nathaniel. He had sent a simple message. "Can we talk one last time?" I need to explain. A part of me wanted to laugh at the audacity of it all. He thought he could just waltz back into my life after everything, and I would give him another chance? The old me, the one who loved him and trusted him, might have considered it. But the new me? The woman sitting in that booth, preparing to take him down? I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. I tapped out a quick reply. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. I want answers, Nathaniel, and I'm not leaving without them." As soon as I hit send, I felt the familiar tension in my chest. This wasn't going to be easy, and I knew it. Nathaniel would try to manipulate me, try to twist the situation in his favor, but I was prepared. I had to be. 30 minutes later, the door to the coffee shop opened, and in walked Nathaniel. He was dressed in his usual sharp suit, but there was something different about him now. He looked nervous, like a man who knew he was walking into a trap but couldn't resist. He spotted me immediately, his eyes lighting up in what I could only assume was supposed to be relief. "Lena," he said softly, his voice a mixture of charm and desperation. "It's good to see you." I didn't say anything. Instead, I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit," I said, my voice steady and cold. "We need to talk." He hesitated for just a moment before pulling out the chair and sitting down. His smile was strained, and his eyes darted nervously to the door, as if expecting someone else to walk in. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," Nathaniel said, leaning forward slightly. "I made a mistake, Lena. I never meant for it to get this far. I never wanted to hurt you." I raised an eyebrow, fighting the urge to scoff. "Really? Because it seems to me like you've been planning this for a while. You drained our accounts, manipulated me, and lied about everything. How much of this was a mistake, Nathaniel? How much was deliberate?" His expression faltered for just a second, but then he straightened up, trying to recover. "Lena, please. You have to understand, I got in over my head. There were things I couldn't control. I was trying to fix everything, but it just spiraled." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms across my chest. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when he realized he wasn't in control anymore. I could see it in his eyes. He thought he had me, that he could manipulate me into believing his story one more time. But he was wrong. "Do you really think I'm that stupid?" I asked, my voice low. "Do you think I didn't notice the withdrawals, the transfers, the lies? I'm a forensic accountant, Nathaniel. I can see everything you've done. And now, it's all coming to an end." His face went pale, the color draining from his cheeks as the realization hit him. His mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time since I had known him, Nathaniel looked truly afraid. "You don't have the money anymore, Nathaniel," I continued, my voice calm and unwavering. "It's all gone. And you don't have me anymore either. You've been running a scam for years, targeting successful women like me, using your career as a financial advisor to manipulate and steal. But that ends today." As I spoke, I saw the subtle shift in his demeanor. The man I had once loved, the man I had trusted, was no longer there. In his place was a con artist, caught in the web of his own lies. Just then, I saw the signal from the FBI agents through the window. They were ready. I nodded slightly, and Mark and Claire moved into position. It was time. Nathaniel's hand shot out, his face now contorted in panic. "Lena, please, you don't understand." The door to the coffee shop swung open, and 2 FBI agents stepped inside. Nathaniel froze, his eyes widening as he realized what had just happened. It was too late. He had been outsmarted. "Mr. Hayes," Mark Roberts said in a low, authoritative voice, "you're under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy." Nathaniel opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked from me to the agents, his face twisted with confusion and fear. The FBI agents moved in quickly, handcuffing him and leading him toward the door. As they took him away, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had done it. I had exposed him for what he was, and now he would face the consequences of his actions. But as the door closed behind him, I couldn't help but feel a pang of something else. The work wasn't over. Nathaniel's arrest was just the beginning. There were still others out there who had been affected by his scams, and the investigation was far from finished. I stood up, my mind already racing through the next steps. The FBI had the evidence they needed, but I had my own journey to finish. Nathaniel might be behind bars, but I had to face the aftermath of everything I had uncovered. The truth was out, but the real work was just beginning. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat at a large conference table, papers and files scattered across its surface like a battlefield. I was surrounded by FBI agents, their eyes glued to their screens, fingers typing rapidly as they sifted through the evidence we had gathered over the past few weeks. Nathaniel's network, his intricate web of lies, deception, and financial manipulation, was beginning to unravel, but I could already tell it was more complex than any of us had imagined. I glanced over at Mark Roberts, one of the lead agents on the case, as he carefully analyzed a series of encrypted financial documents. His brow furrowed in concentration, and I knew he was seeing the same thing I had seen. Nathaniel wasn't just running a con on me. He had built an entire criminal operation, and we were only beginning to uncover its true scope. "Lena, come look at this," Mark called over to me, his voice tight with a mixture of shock and determination. I stood up and walked over to his station, peering at the screen. It was a digital map of Nathaniel's financial activities, accounts, transfers, offshore investments. There were dozens of names, each one connected to Nathaniel in ways I hadn't seen before. It was like a spider's web, with Nathaniel at the center, and countless individuals, some of them victims like me, tangled in the mess. "Looks like he wasn't working alone," I said, my voice low as the weight of the discovery settled in. "He had people helping him cover his tracks." Mark nodded. "Yeah, we've been tracing some of these accounts, and we've found a few connections to shell companies, fake identities, and people who were laundering money for him. This is bigger than we thought." I could feel my pulse quicken as I processed what Mark was saying. Nathaniel hadn't just manipulated women for money. He had created an entire criminal network that spanned multiple states, each layer more complicated than the last. I had thought I was just unraveling his personal fraud, but now it seemed like I was only scratching the surface. "We need to find out who else is involved," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Nathaniel didn't do this alone, and if we're going to bring him down, we need to go after everyone who helped him." Claire Daniels, the other FBI agent working on the case, stood up from her desk, holding a file in her hands. "We've been looking into Nathaniel's past associates, people he's worked with, clients who may have been involved in his schemes. We found a few key players. Some of them are big names in the financial world, people who had the means to help him hide these activities." I nodded, taking the file from Claire. "I want to see everything. If we're going to bring this down, we need to be prepared for what's coming next." We spent the next few hours combing through the evidence, connecting the dots between Nathaniel's clients, associates, and the numerous financial transactions that had been funneled through his network. Each discovery felt like another punch to the gut, but I couldn't stop now. I couldn't let Nathaniel's lies remain hidden any longer. I had to expose the truth, no matter how deep it went. As we pieced together the puzzle, I realized that Nathaniel's betrayal had been part of something much larger than I had ever imagined. He wasn't just a con artist out for money. He had built an empire based on lies, manipulation, and theft. And I wasn't the only one he had hurt. There were other women, other victims, whose lives had been destroyed by Nathaniel's actions. But with the evidence we were uncovering, we had the power to bring his entire operation crashing down. "This is bigger than just Nathaniel," Claire said, her voice filled with a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. "He's been working with others, people we haven't even identified yet. And if we don't move quickly, we could lose the chance to take them all down." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The weight of it all was heavy, but I knew what needed to be done. We need to find out who else is involved, who's covering for him, who's hiding his money. We need names, dates, accounts, everything. Over the next few days, we continued to gather more evidence, each new discovery adding to the growing pile of incriminating information. The deeper we dug, the more we realized that Nathaniel's scam wasn't just isolated to one man. It was a much larger, systemic problem. This wasn't just about one con artist and his victims. This was about exposing a criminal network that had been operating for years. But even as I looked at the evidence, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just collecting proof of Nathaniel's crimes. I was starting to see the broader picture. This wasn't just about bringing him down. It was about shining a light on a system that allowed men like him to prey on vulnerable women, using their trust to steal from them. We were closing in on the truth, but there was still so much to uncover. The FBI was now involved in a massive investigation, one that extended far beyond Nathaniel. The work wasn't over yet. As I left the FBI's offices that night, the weight of everything I had uncovered pressed heavily on my shoulders. I had come so far, but there was still so much more to do. Nathaniel's trial was coming, but I knew this victory was only the beginning. I had exposed one man's lies, but the truth was much bigger than I had ever expected. There were still so many others out there who had been affected by his crimes, and I knew that the fight wasn't over. Nathaniel had thought he could get away with it, but with the evidence in hand, with the support of the FBI, we were about to show him just how wrong he was. The investigation was far from over, and I wasn't going to stop until everyone who had been part of Nathaniel's fraud network was held accountable. The courtroom was unnervingly quiet as I walked in, the weight of the day pressing down on me. The air felt heavy with anticipation, and I could feel the tension in the room, thick enough to cut with a knife. Nathaniel sat at the defendant's table, his once confident demeanor now replaced with an air of unease. His shoulders were slumped, his hands fidgeting in his lap. For a man who had manipulated so many, it was a striking contrast to see him now, facing the consequences of his actions. I glanced around the room, taking in the faces of the victims who had come to witness this moment, the women whose lives had been torn apart by Nathaniel's schemes. Rachel Clark sat in the front row, her expression one of determination and resolve, while others took their seats around her, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. This was our day, a day for justice to finally be served. Mark Roberts and Claire Daniels were seated behind me, their presence a silent reminder that I wasn't alone in this. We had all worked so hard to get here, to expose the truth, and now the final step was upon us. Nathaniel was about to face the judge, and I was here to make sure he was held accountable for everything he had done. As the judge entered the room, the silence deepened. Everyone stood as the proceedings began, the sound of the gavel ringing through the courtroom like the toll of a bell. The judge called the case, and I felt my heart beat faster as I took my place on the witness stand. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I had gathered the evidence, I had watched Nathaniel's life unravel, and now I was here to speak the truth. Nathaniel's lawyer stood up first, attempting to cast doubt on the accusations, but the weight of the evidence against him was undeniable. The stacks of documents, the financial records, the testimonies from the victims, it all spoke for itself. Nathaniel had tried to manipulate the court, just as he had manipulated so many before, but this time it wasn't going to work. His lies couldn't hide the truth anymore. When it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath before speaking. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on me, but I didn't flinch. I was done being afraid. This man had stolen my life, my trust, and my sense of security, and now it was time for him to pay for it. I met Nathaniel Hayes under false pretenses. I began, my voice steady and clear. He presented himself as someone I could trust, as someone who was helping me with my finances. But what I didn't know was that he was using me. He was using my trust to steal from me, to manipulate me. And I'm not the only one. There are others out there who he has hurt, who he has ruined. I continued, detailing how Nathaniel had orchestrated the entire scheme, using his position as a financial advisor to target successful women like me, draining their accounts and leaving them with nothing. I spoke of the evidence we had uncovered, the patterns of his fraud, and the lives he had destroyed. As I spoke, I could see Nathaniel's eyes flicker with something, perhaps fear, perhaps regret. But it was too late. He had already done the damage, and now the truth was coming to light. When I finished, I sat back down, my hands trembling slightly. But I didn't look at Nathaniel. I didn't need to. I had already faced him in my own way. The rest of the room, the judge, the jury, they all knew what he was. It was over. The trial continued, and the tension in the room grew with every passing minute. Nathaniel's defense team did everything they could to fight back, but it was clear that the evidence was overwhelming. The more they tried to poke holes in the case, the more they revealed about Nathaniel's true character. He couldn't hide from the truth anymore. Finally, after hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. My heart raced as the judge asked them to stand. We, the jury, find the defendant, Nathaniel Hayes, guilty on all charges of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy, the foreman announced, his voice strong and steady. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding, and the room seemed to exhale with me. The verdict had been delivered, and Nathaniel Hayes was finally going to face the consequences of his actions. But as the weight of that moment settled over me, I couldn't help but feel a pang of something else. Relief? Yes. But also something deeper, something that still felt unfinished. The judge, without hesitation, sentenced Nathaniel to 25 years in federal prison, the sound of the gavel ringing through the room once again. A sense of finality washed over me. It was done. He was going away, and his network was beginning to crumble. But even with that victory, there was still a part of me that couldn't fully let go. The damage had been done. And while I had regained my power, I knew that my journey wasn't truly over. As Nathaniel was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. He wasn't going to hurt anyone else. He wasn't going to take another penny from another woman. That, at least, was something. But deep down, I knew that the emotional scars from this would take longer to heal. Trust had been broken, not just with Nathaniel, but with myself. It was a slow process, one I couldn't rush. I looked over at Mark and Claire, who were both standing, nodding toward me. We had done it. Together, we had exposed Nathaniel for the criminal he was. But as I walked out of the courtroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, more to my story. There were still other victims out there, and there was still work to be done. This wasn't the end of the road. It was just the beginning. The sun was setting over Lake Michigan as I stood at the window of my new apartment, looking out over the vast expanse of water. The view was breathtaking, a peaceful contrast to the storm I had weathered just months before. The apartment was small, but it was mine. It was a symbol of the new life I was building, of the freedom I had fought so hard to reclaim. And yet, despite the beauty of the scene before me, a part of me still felt like I was standing at the edge of something. The end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The weight of the past year hung heavy on my shoulders. Nathaniel's trial, his conviction, the countless hours spent unraveling his web of deceit. It had all taken a toll. But now, it was over. Or at least, that's what I had told myself. I had gotten my closure, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was still something I needed to do, something more. As I unpacked the last of my boxes, I found a small piece of paper, a note from Mark Roberts, one of the FBI agents who had helped me throughout the investigation. It had been tucked inside a folder I had brought home from the trial. The message was simple, but it was enough to make my heart race. Lena, we've been impressed by your expertise and dedication throughout this case. There's an opportunity for you to help others who've been victims of financial fraud. The FBI is looking for a consultant to assist with investigations going forward. If you're interested, we'd like to talk. Mark Roberts, FBI. The words echoed in my mind. A consultant for the FBI. The offer was a huge one that would require me to dive right back into the world of financial fraud, to confront the very things that had caused me so much pain. But at the same time, it felt like the next logical step. I had the skills, I had the knowledge, and perhaps most importantly, I had the drive to make a real difference. I sat down on the couch, staring at the note in my hands. I had just left a life behind, one filled with lies and betrayal, and now I was being asked to step back into that world, to help others who were in the same position I had been. The decision wasn't easy. Part of me wondered if I was ready to take on such a responsibility, to confront those who would try to hurt others in the same way Nathaniel had hurt me. But deep down, I knew I couldn't walk away from this opportunity. I had the chance to use my experiences, my knowledge to help others, to stop men like Nathaniel from ruining more lives. The phone on the table buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Claire Daniels, the other FBI agent who had worked alongside Mark. "Lena, I know you're still processing everything, but the team has been talking. We'd love to have you on board. We're facing more cases, more fraud networks, and we need someone who knows the ins and outs of this world. Let us know if you're interested. The job is yours if you want it." I took a deep breath. My heart was pounding in my chest as I thought about the future, about what it would mean to dive back into the world of fraud investigations. The last year had been a whirlwind, and I had spent so much time focused on bringing Nathaniel to justice that I hadn't stopped to think about what came next. But now, the next step was clear. It wasn't about running away from my past, it was about using it to make a difference. I could help people who had been hurt just like I had. I could stop the cycle of manipulation and deceit before it reached the next victim. I picked up the phone and dialed Mark's number. It rang for a few moments before he picked up. "Lena." Mark's voice was warm, as always, and I could hear the smile in his tone. "What's your decision?" "I'm in," I said, my voice steady but filled with a new sense of purpose. "I'm ready to help." There was a pause on the other end, and then Mark let out a relieved sigh. "That's great news. We're looking forward to having you on the team. We'll start planning your first case as soon as you're ready." I set the phone down, feeling a rush of excitement and nervousness. This was it. This was my new beginning. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I wasn't just someone who had been hurt. I was someone who could help others avoid the same fate. I could use my skills to fight back against the fraudsters, to bring justice to those who had been too afraid to speak out. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I met with the FBI team, learned more about the cases they were handling, and began preparing for my new role as a consultant. It wasn't easy. The work was intense, and I found myself dealing with emotions I hadn't expected to confront so soon. I had spent so much time chasing justice for Nathaniel's crimes that I hadn't fully processed the emotional toll of everything that had happened. But as I dove deeper into the cases, I realized that this was where I was meant to be. This was my calling. I began working with the FBI agents, reviewing financial documents, tracking transactions, and uncovering hidden fraud schemes. It felt good to be in control again, to be using my expertise to help others instead of running from my past. I wasn't just working for the FBI. I was working for justice, for the victims, for the women who had been silenced, who had been manipulated just like I had been. One day, after a long day of reviewing files, I stood by the window of my apartment again, looking out at the lake. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink as the sun began to set. It was a beautiful sight, but for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. I had found my purpose. I had found a way to heal and to help others heal too. My journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The morning fog hung low over Lake Michigan, swirling like a blanket that didn't quite want to let go. I stood by the window, my eyes fixed on the water, though my mind was far from at peace. The days following Nathaniel's arrest had been a whirlwind. While I had felt a sense of accomplishment after everything we'd uncovered, there was still something left to do. The final remnants of his criminal network had to be taken down, and the last conspirators needed to be arrested. The job wasn't truly finished until every piece of his twisted empire had been dismantled. The FBI had been working around the clock to trace every last detail of Nathaniel's network, but it wasn't easy. For years, he had carefully hidden every transaction, every connection, behind layers of fake identities and offshore accounts. But we were getting close. Very close. The evidence we had already gathered had revealed a hidden financial network tied to Nathaniel's past, one that spanned more than just a few shady deals. This was bigger than I had ever imagined. The phone on my desk buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Claire Daniels, one of the FBI agents who had been with me since the beginning. "Lena, we found something." Claire's voice was urgent. "There's one last piece of Nathaniel's network we haven't touched yet. We're tracking down a few of his associates, and it looks like we're about to make a move. We could use your help." I didn't hesitate. The chase wasn't over, and I wasn't about to back down now. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door, making my way to the FBI's headquarters. The investigation had grown more complex as we traced every last lead, but I knew that the final pieces were about to fall into place. Nathaniel's actions had hurt so many, and I had come too far to let it slip through my fingers. By the time I arrived at the FBI offices, Mark and Claire were already gathered around a large table, reviewing the final pieces of evidence. Maps of offshore accounts, names of people connected to Nathaniel. Each document felt like a step closer to closing the chapter on this nightmare. "We found a few of his last remaining conspirators," Mark said, pointing to the names on the screen. "They've been hiding under the radar for years, but we have enough to make a move. They're in the wind now, but if we act quickly, we can catch them before they disappear for good." I nodded. It felt like I had been chasing this for a lifetime, but now it was within reach. The network was crumbling, and I wasn't about to let the last pieces of it slip away. "We'll need to move fast," Claire said, standing up from the table. "If they're connected to Nathaniel, they'll be just as dangerous. We can't let them escape." I couldn't agree more. Nathaniel had caused enough destruction, but there were still people out there who had benefited from his schemes. People who had worked alongside him and helped him pull off this elaborate con. If they weren't stopped now, they would just find new ways to hurt more people. The plan was simple, swift and precise. We knew where to find the remaining conspirators. The FBI would move in, taking down the last pieces of Nathaniel's network. As much as I had longed for the end of this chapter, the reality was that this wasn't a story with a simple conclusion. It was a fight that needed to be fought, no matter how much it had drained me. The FBI agents sprang into action, making the necessary calls and organizing teams to move on the suspects. I was right there alongside them, my heart pounding in my chest as the hours ticked by. Every second felt like a lifetime. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the call came through. "They're in custody," Mark said, his voice filled with relief. "We've got them. The network's been taken down." The weight I had been carrying for so long lifted in an instant. The final conspirators were arrested, their financial activities exposed, and their ties to Nathaniel severed. It was over. At long last, Nathaniel's criminal empire had been dismantled, and justice had been served. I exhaled slowly, leaning back against the wall as the adrenaline finally started to wear off. It was hard to process all that had happened, everything I had witnessed and been a part of. Nathaniel's lies had almost destroyed me, but they had also led me to something much bigger, a chance to use my skills, my knowledge, to make a difference, to help others. "We did it," Claire said, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips as she walked over to me. "You did it." I couldn't help but smile back. "We did." The investigation was complete. The final chapter of Nathaniel's deceit had been written, and the people who had helped him were behind bars. But even as I allowed myself to feel that brief sense of triumph, I knew that this wasn't the end. The work wasn't over. There would always be more fraudsters, more victims, more lies to uncover. And as long as I had the strength to fight, I would continue to do so. As I walked out of the FBI office later that evening, the sky was clear, and the stars had begun to twinkle above. The air was crisp, the streets bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. I couldn't help but glance up at the sky, feeling a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. Nathaniel had tried to break me, but I hadn't broken. I had come full circle, stronger than before, and ready for whatever came next. Looking out over Lake Michigan from my apartment that night, I reflected on how far I had come. The past year had changed me in ways I hadn't fully understood until now. I had started out as a victim, someone who had been deceived, manipulated, and hurt. But now I was someone who fought back. I was someone who had taken control of my own life and my own destiny. The future was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I was ready. As I stand here today, reflecting on everything I've been through, I realize that my journey wasn't just about exposing someone else's lies. It was about discovering my own strength and reclaiming control over my life. Life throws curveballs at us all, betrayal, deceit, and challenges we never saw coming. But I want you to remember this. No matter how dark things seem, you have the power to turn it around. Your mistakes, your failures, they don't define you. What matters is how you rise from them. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the truth always has a way of coming to light. You don't have to face your battles alone, whether it's financial fraud, heartbreak, or anything else. There are people, just like you, who are fighting those same battles, and together we can make a difference. So, what about you? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where the truth seemed impossible to uncover? Or have you been betrayed in a way that shook you to your core? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, if it touched your heart, then please let me know by commenting with a number 1 or sharing where you're from. I'd love to hear how this video connected with you. And if you didn't quite like it, that's okay too. Tell me why and share where you're watching from. We're all in this together, and your feedback means the world to me. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next chapter. I have more stories to share, and I'd love for you to be part of this journey with me. By incorporating this message, we inspire reflection and invite deeper connection with the audience, while encouraging interaction and community building. It also keeps the focus on empowerment and resilience, aligning with American cultural values of personal growth and overcoming adversity.